You hear me?
Wonderful. I can hear you, and we'll be able to see you momentarily. So thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Scannapieco, let me just start off with Ukraine, because I feel like this is really something that we need to address first of all. How is the war in Ukraine, and how will it change really the role of Cassa Depositi? Could we expect a role from the state lender in defense investment or in management of defense budget like Germany?
Well, it's clearly a game changer, and it will impact the Italian economy a lot, and the impacts will mainly depend on three factors, in my view: the duration of the conflict, and of course the outcome of the conflict itself, the extent of the sanction, and clearly we can see, as Minister Franco was mentioning, a deterioration of the climate of confidence that was there. Italy was posting a record growth in GDP in the last year. So clearly, there is a direct impact that our role is to mitigate. As it was said before, Italy's trade with Russia and Ukraine is not huge. It's around 27 billion euro, 80% of which, 22 billion, is with Russia. And we will see that there is an impact, especially in certain industrial clusters, and in certain industries. I think about food and agriculture. Italy imports from Russia and Ukraine 40% of wheat, 50% of corn, 60% of tender grains. So those are the kind of industries that are going to be most impacted. The second point, and this also was mentioned before, is the energy dependence of Italy from Russia. About 40% of gas and 10% of oil comes from Russia. Therefore, we will have some industries that will be more affected than others. And our role is mainly to focus and to increase the resilience of those industries, and also to work on the supply chains. Mm-hmm. I think that after the COVID crisis, Europe have recognized that we cannot, give for granted that we can rely on third countries for the production even of masks, and therefore there is the re-internalization of certain industrial productions that we thought could have been externalized. And
so Mr. Scannapieco, so what does it mean exactly for the role of CDP? For example, for digitization, does it mean you're going to accelerate? Is it investing more money? What does it mean for Chinese stakeholders? Like, concretely, what will you do different?
What we do different, it means that we are trying to giving support to the sectors that are going to be most affected. And all in all, we will be pushing on those investments that will help Italy to be less reliant on some countries for what concerns some materials. So support to certain industries and, infrastructure, energy. We are shareholders of some of those companies, and we are also directly investing in renewable energies, also energy efficiency. One of the side effects of this crisis and of the increase in energy prices is that in the short term, many countries will rely more on coal and on other polluting energy. But at the same time, in the medium term, more money will be spent on innovation and on the green transition, therefore on energy efficiency and other sources of energy, to reduce the dependency over polluting fuel.
When you look at the telecom sector, so does it become even more strategic? Again, is there a decision about what you do with Chinese investors given the presence of 5G? Is it something that can happen quickly, or is it something that you still need to make a decision on? How that will, what it means for CDP, what it means for Italy and Europe, the investment in this specific industry?
As you know, we are active in the telecommunication sector. We have close to 10% share in Telecom Italia, and we own 60% of Open Fiber. And we are there, following the evolution in the sector, which is clearly strategic for Italy. For what concerns the relationship with the Chinese producer of manufacturing equipment, I think that this is a question that it is better to be posed to the CEO of those companies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure behind, behind closed doors, you're having some pretty robust discussions. Are you planning to sell equity stakes at the same pace as which you were going to before the war?
The strategic plan of Cassa Depositi and Prestiti is quite clear. We are going to retain shares in the companies that we consider strategic, mainly in infrastructure, in which, by the way, we have a joint venture with State Grid, so with the Chinese investors, in particular in Snam and Interna. So we are going to remain stable shareholders of these companies. We have other participation in other companies, and here the concept that we have introduced in our strategic plan is the concept of the rotation of capital. What does it mean? It means that we will exit from some companies once our role as national promotional investor has been accomplished. Last part of the equity strategy is to strongly invest more and more in building the ecosystem of private equity and venture capital, where Italy is lagging behind. Now, venture capital is in particular something in which we are extremely active. We recently received 2 billion from the government to be invested in we act as a fund of fund mainly in the venture capital, so in accelerator, in first-time funds, essentially building the ecosystem. And here, the results in Italy, I would say, are extremely positive. We moved from 400 million invested in venture capital in Italy in 2020 to over 1 billion last year. So we see a blossoming of startups, and now we have the finance which is able to accompany them in their growth path.
Can you give us an idea of how the disbursement of recovery funds is going? Is it going to plan? Is it going faster than expected or slower?
Allow me to make a comment before going into the figure. I mean, it's going according to the schedule. As you know, we have achieved the 51 targets, and therefore the Commission has decided for the first installment of 24.1 billion euro to be given to Italy. But it would be a big mistake to consider the Resilience and Recovery Fund as a purely financial event. This is a unique opportunity to reshape Italy. And the word here must be one, and one only: discontinuity. Italy has not a very good track record in the way it is spending money. Allow me to give a few figures. In the last 20 years, before the COVID crisis, so 1999, 2019, the French GDP increased 32.4%, the German one 30.2%, the Spanish one 43.6%, and the Italian GDP grew only by 7.9%. What are the causes of this? Are the availability of financial resources? No, this is not the cause. The main reason is because we have a lot of bureaucracy, stratification of law, and uncertainty. Therefore, the Resilience and Recovery Fund is an opportunity to reshape the way in which we invest money and to accelerate on the investment.
Yeah, but why, Mr. Scannapieco, should investors believe you now? What is the one thing? When investors come and see you and you say, look, the recovery funds, we're going to get it done. Italy's a new country. This will change the path forward. What can you point to as success so far?
There are two elements, I would say. First one is the necessity, which is fully perceived by all policymakers, to give a change to this path of 0-point GDP growth that has characterized Italy. The second is that we are reducing the uncertainties. And, typical investors have been extremely present in the energy sector, where there is a very good regulation system. We are trying to do the same in transportation, in local transportation. So this is a moment in which, frankly speaking, I see all the conditions for foreign investors to come here, because there will be increased clarity, speed, in order to meet the milestones foreseen by the National Resilience and Recovery Program, and also the availability of resources. The role of CDP in this is to bring its own expertise to match this with European funds, national funds, and private resources in order to accelerate and make the recovery possible, of course.
Mr. Scannapieco, I don't know how many times a day you get asked about, what will happen to Telecom Italia, but what will you tell? What do you tell them, and what are you telling me now?
Exactly the same answer. No comment.
what will happen to Saipem? If you look at what you're owning at the moment, what gives you the biggest headache, actually? What do you spend the most time trying to figure out what you can sell?
In my personal history, I've been many years in the Treasury, so I'm used to this kind of situation. So we are, all problems have a solution. On Saipem, we are advanced on it. I'm quite confident. In Telecom Italia, it is quite clear. I hear often about, the single network. Obviously, from an industrial point of view, it makes no sense to duplicate investments. So there is no particular headache, only one objective, which is to support the growth of Italy. And this is not done only by, supporting and pointing on the equity side, but also a lot of activity that we are doing on the advisory and lending side. And mainly, allow me to say, mainly on advisory. We are working hand in hand with the ministries, with regions, with the municipality to help them spending the money which are available.
But do you think it will be resolved quite quickly, that we'll have progress on Telecom Italia in the next couple of months, or will it take longer?
I said no comment before, and this is the second question. As you know,
My
markets are open, and it's legitimate for you to pose this question. It is absolutely legitimate to me to answer the way I'm answering. Sorry for that.
Mr. Scannapieco, when you look at companies, the fact that it's difficult after 2 years of COVID, and now we have this extra shock with inflation and the war in Ukraine, are you worried about debt sustainability for a lot of Italian companies, and how should investors look at that?
Clearly, if you look at the Italian landscape of mid-caps, in particularly, Italy has used more bank financing than other countries. However, this is a European problem, I would say. When I was in the European institution, we saw that this was a common problem. This is why we are investing a lot in supporting the private equity industry, venture capital, and in general private debt, and in general non-bank lending. But clearly there is an opportunity, and we have seen that last year the volume of private equity which has gone into the industry was huge. There were 241 deals for a total volume of around 12 billion. The operation in size is between 50 and 100 million. What does it mean? Is that these companies that were traditionally family-owned companies are opening up their capital to professional investors. Mm-hmm. And this can benefit, and this can provide both an opportunity to professional investor and both an opportunity to managerialize some companies. This is a big opportunity, I think, for investors. And we have seen a lot of attention by foreign investors in the private equity fields, but also in the venture capital. And this is an area in which we, through the Italian Investment Fund and through the CDP Venture Capital, we are extremely active. So your question is, yes, it's true, there is a lot of dependency, but more and more there are new instruments to provide equity to companies.
Mr. Scannapieco, thank you so much for a very brilliant and interesting conversation. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, and sorry for not having you there.
Thank you.